Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah.
I don't know why every time I come up here, I just love that Miss Dazan always says my name. Out of everyone, she always says, "Good morning, Anthony," or "Good afternoon, Anthony." I think it sounds so sweet. Anyway, so through my studies, I've been coming I've kind of found, out of all the Gospels, I found that John is one of my more favorite ones. It's a lot different from the rest, because the first, how many Gospels are there? 4? Yeah, 4. Yeah. The first 3 of the Gospels are called Synoptic Gospels, and that means they're all in common. Well, John, compared to the rest of them, it's a little bit different. He downplays the miracles that Jesus has performed. He only mentions 7 in it, and he even downplays the parables that Jesus says. There are none throughout all of John. And what John tends to focus on more is Jesus' reason for being here, why he came, what he's doing. And so you get a little bit more matter-of-fact, a more matter-of-fact book that talks about the reason, the purpose of Jesus. And so whenever we think of John, whenever we think of the Bible, for most non-Christians, what do we think of? We think of John 3:16. That is the trademark golden verse in the Bible. And almost everyone in the world who's heard Jesus knows that verse. Whether they believe in him or not, they know the John 3:16. You don't even have to put it on there. I hope you didn't. You did. You spoiled it. Yeah, and so we all know what it says without having to look up at that PowerPoint. It says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." And that's just if you could summarize the Bible in one verse, it would be that. It would be John 3:16. The entire Bible is about Christ, and what Christ is doing is for us, his children. He wants to save us. And so what I've been seeing a lot lately, more so as I go out into the real world, and I see a lot more people in more destitute positions in their life, as well as when I go to school. And it's funny that in school now, when in my classes, we always have to do some weird, it's like this weird elementary school, introduce yourself, what are you doing with your life kind of thing. And I'm just like, I'm going to be a pastor. And I always get this oh, and some people are like, "Oh, you're going to be a priest?" I'm like, "No, I'm going to be a pastor." It's a little different. But I always get these oh, and so people start asking me questions about just God. And it's a nice, just open invitation for people to talk to me. But no matter where I go, I always encounter the same thing, that people just have this view of God as being so condemning and just so wrathful towards him, just being this extremely old covenant God who just can wipe away an entire generation of people in an instant. And he has all that wrath focused on them. And so whenever I hear that, I always think of how I wish the golden verse included the verse after, because it's John 3:17, and what that says is, "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him." And as we all know, that Jesus has redeemed humanity through his sacrifice, that now all we have to do is receive it. All we have to do now is accept this gift. And as we keep going, down to verse 18, it says, "Whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already, because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son." And so we see that wherever you are, whoever you are, as long as you reject him, whether openly and saying "No, I don't want this," or whether you've heard it and you just chose not to accept it, you are condemned. Because as we all know, from the sin from Adam and Eve, there's a fall of man. So if we don't accept that gift, then we are condemned. But when we choose to accept that, and that condemnation is lifted. So let's keep going to verse 19. "This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people love darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil." We'll just keep going till 21. "Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light, for the fear of their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. Now those two verses are, out of all those, out of John 3:16 up to 21, those last two verses, 20 and 21, tend to be my favorite because it shows that God's light, God's presence, it seemingly has a condemning nature. It seems to have this just, if you're doing wrong, you are wrong. It just seems like it has a condemning nature, because what you find is when, even on a human level, whenever you're out doing something bad, because we're all human, we make mistakes. Whenever you do something bad, whenever you made a mistake as a child, whatever you were like before you accepted Christ into your life, you enjoy being in that dark place. You enjoy being in darkness because you don't want it to be exposed. And when this, let's use an analogy of being in a dark room. When you're in a completely dark room and someone opens up a window and this light shines in, you shield your eyes initially. And it's like, if you're so used to the dark, you run away from it. You try to close that light immediately because you don't want that, because it just seems so oppressive in its nature from what you're so accustomed to. Your eyes get adjusted, your body gets adjusted to the darkness, and it seems oppressive in its nature. And so what we find is that when those who live by the light, once you receive Christ in your life, when you've received His light inside of you, you have the exact opposite reaction. You want to be surrounded by light. You want to be surrounded. You want to be seen for what you are. You want to be seen for everything you do. You want Christ to just acknowledge you, and He does. He acknowledges all of us. Because when those who live by the truth, the knowledge of who Christ is, what He's done for us, we walk in the light. And when we're walking in the light, we want to be seen by Christ. We want everything to be seen by Christ, because the second we do receive Him, we're seen as spotless. We're seen as righteous. We're seen as holy. There's nothing on our book when we die. Everything is erased. He keeps no record of wrong. And so I really enjoy that verse, those last two verses, because it just shows that people who get into this mentality that God is this really condemning God, it's because of where they are in their life. They're so surrounded by darkness that when they see a glimpse of light, when they see a glimpse of what is right, they flee from it. They're scared of it. But I know all of us here have received that light, and so how we're viewed by God is holy. How we're viewed by God is righteous. How we're viewed by God is perfect. And so that's what I've been going out, and whenever I tell people, I usually talk to them about John 3:16. I'm like, you already know what John 3:16 is, don't you? And they're like, yeah, that's the whole, like, for God so loved the world verse, right? I'm like, exactly. But what you don't know is the verse after that, and the few verses that come after that, and I read it to them. And a lot of people tend to get a kind of a glimmer of how God views them, that in their current state, they're condemned because of our human nature, because of the sin we made originally. But the second that we accept that light, we are redeemed. The second we accept that free gift, we're no longer condemned. That's your Sunday devotional.